So my name is Carl Bennett, and I'm the co-founder of Status, which is an open source messaging platform that we're creating basically to interact with decentralized applications on the Ethereum public blockchain.
Yeah, and I'm Jarrad, the other co-founder, and working on the same project, obviously.
So how did you come up with that idea for Status in the first place?
Originally, we were actually looking at doing a Bitcoin version of a mobile browser back in 2013, and that was always like a sort of side project, never really launched. We were playing around with like Mastercoin, Counterparty, colored coins, and Namecoin, and all these kind of interesting projects that were trying to push the capabilities of blockchain. And then when sort of the Ethereum white paper came out in 2014, it was just solved all of the problems that these projects were having.
Oh, so you've been working on this for a while then?
2014, there was no implementation of Ethereum, but like we've been around the scene since the very early days. But it wasn't until probably 2015 that there actually became implementations that you could start playing around with.
Yeah, it wasn't really until actually about 14 months ago now that we started treating it as a full-time thing and started to build out the team and such.
Fantastic. So why don't you guys kind of give us a rundown on exactly what is Status, who would use it, how would I use it?
Sure. Okay, so I guess what we're trying to create is just a very easy way for non-technical people to begin interacting with blockchain technologies and in particular decentralized applications. Mm-hmm. So what sort of started out is we'd create this sort of browser for Ethereum, like a Web3 browser, you could say. What became apparent to us as we were building this on mobile is maybe that wasn't the best user interface. And so it kind of evolved into this messaging type platform. So if you're familiar with something like WeChat, mm-hmm. Status looks a lot like WeChat when you open it. But the difference, of course, is it's completely peer-to-peer and we don't have any centralized service in the background. So how would you use it? Well, you can send messages to people. You can basically take control of your wealth. You can send payments to people. For now, that's only Ether, but we're adding ERC20 support soon. And then, most interestingly, you can interact with decentralized applications, both in this sort of web view, but also in a chat context.
Yeah, it's also important to note that Status is actual Ethereum node participating in the network itself. So it's fully peer-to-peer, and it's built entirely on top of the Ethereum sub-protocols. So we're all familiar with the Ethereum blockchain, and we use the LES protocol to synchronize the blockchain headers. But we do messaging over another sub-protocol of Ethereum called Whisper, which has some really interesting sort of dark routing and privacy functions built into it. And later, when we have image and audio support, those will be running over Swarm, which is a sort of decentralized file storage. You can kind of think of it like BitTorrent with an economic layer.
Mm-hmm. Now, so the value proposition would be it is a peer-to-peer decentralized messaging ecosystem that may go into competition against WeChat, for example.
Yeah, and I mean that value proposition you described obviously only appeals to the small cohort of the population.
Sure.
But I really think the value proposition that some of these dApps are going to provide are going to be greater than their centralized counterparts, and there's going to be all these use cases that weren't really possible before blockchains were around, and so a lot of these dApps that are coming along that we want to integrate with are going to be super fascinating inside of this chat type of context. So you might be familiar with Augur or Gnosis.
Yep.
Perhaps you're having a conversation with me via Status, and we could place some kind of social bet on the outcome of any event. This is just like one example, but as the ecosystem develops more and more, there's just going to be this whole sort of huge suite of different dApps that you'll be able to use with inside Status.
Now you mentioned you were a full node, right?
Yeah. Well, we're a full, like we're a node, like a real node, but where you sync via the light client. So you're not a full node in the sense that you're syncing the entire blockchain.
All right, cool. That was okay. Thanks.
Yeah. But I mean, the important thing is with Status is you can actually take Ethereum and the entire dApps, the ecosystem around with you, and you can have access to any of those dApps at your fingertips, just like you would in a web browser.
Okay. Let's run through a login. So for example, if I'm using Status, would it be the same process like Facebook? I put my email, my address, I pick a username. Like how would the security onboarding work?
Well, I mean, like whenever you start looking at things like that, typically you're logging into a server per se.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it looks kind of similar on the front end, but the difference.
By the way, you guys are doing a great job for UX. So that's one thing I do really love what you guys are doing because I saw the whole the mock-up that you did. So that's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, so basically you generate this private key that you've entered your password in. In the future, we'll have like biometrics or a PIN code. And then you just decrypt your private key when you log in per se.
Okay.
But you're not really logging into anywhere. You're just decrypting whatever private keys.
And if I lose that, if I lose that PIN, am I fucked?
That's a really good question. So this is whole shift of switching responsibility to the end users, right?
Sure.
Which is why we want to solve that using these sort of blockchain-based identity systems, which are essentially smart contracts which acts as a proxy to you that reside on the blockchain and they manage your assets. So if you throw away your phone or you lose your private keys, there is ways that you can actually recover ownership or custody over this proxy smart contract that you controlled with a previous private key. And one of those is potentially using social proof. So you would sign, when you create this proxy contract, you actually create these sort of signed messages with your existing private key, and you distribute them to your friends, or you could hide it under your bed or in like a safe deposit box or something like this. And then you can get 3 or 5 of these private messages in the future when you do lose your phone to recover that account.
Facebook started rolling out something pretty interesting too. They started rolling out trusted contacts in case somebody hacks your account or something happens, where you can call on your trusted contacts and be like, hey, can you verify who I am?
Yes, it's very similar in concept, except for this is decentralized.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So switching gears, let's say hypothetically we have, I don't know, like 1 million users come tomorrow, start using Status. Are you guys worried right now on the scalability, like transaction cost? Will it cost me to actually use, like if I send a message, is that a transaction cost? The speed of everything. So is there kind of like a roadmap right now when it comes to, okay, you've built this on top of Ethereum, but does Ethereum have the necessary scalability at the current moment?
Yeah, at the current moment, everything is pretty much experimental in alpha. Even Ethereum isn't even its final stages of development. They're working on things like proof of stake and sharding, which are to address these sort of scalability issues. In terms of sending a message, no, that's not done on the blockchain. It doesn't cost you anything. Okay. It's done over a different sub-protocol. It just uses the same node base as the Ethereum blockchain does.
Okay.
And so that's pretty much it.
What's your guys' business model?
To answer your question more directly, like we're not in a position where we can be scaling right now. So Status itself is in alpha as well.
Yeah.
We haven't undergone our security audits, which is something we're going to begin this quarter.
Okay.
And we're kind of aiming for a mainnet release Q1 of next year.
Oh, that's good. That's around the corner. So I was going to ask you, what's your business model for Status? Or you're not worrying about that right now and you're just worrying about user acquisition?
Sure. So I think it's some of these new sort of economic models can be created through token issuance. That's really fascinating. So rather than trying to extract as much value as we can from users, we can issue this token. This token represents sort of governance within the application, but it's also a utility token that's required for certain features. And
like, what are some features?
I think the most practical example is a push notification market. Jarrad can probably explain that more.
Yeah, so I mean, you come from a marketing background, so you're very familiar with this sort of advertising space. And so if you look at how, like, say, platform owners such as Facebook or YouTube, they're offering these sort of services for free, but they do cost a lot in bandwidth and sort of server costs and that sort of thing, which, I mean, drives them to want to essentially extract value from their users. And how they typically do this is either by data brokers selling the data directly, or developing some kind of ad platform and generating leads for advertisers. So what we're really trying to do is actually start putting the sort of governing abilities and of Status to stakeholders in the Status network itself. This becomes really interesting because then, like, a lot of these costs which are hidden from us in these free services actually become explicit. So Carl had mentioned the push notifications. We can actually create a market around basic services like push notifications. Say if in a decentralized application, achieving a similar user experience to what we have today, certain things become a little non-trivial. And that is this idea that, okay, if I come offline, I'm no longer in the peer-to-peer network. How do I get notified that somebody is messaging me offline? So with this, it allows you to define some, delegate via a deposit some node in the network to essentially hold your messages offline for you and send you a push notification. Okay. And then you pay for these via microtransactions. But what's really interesting about this is it makes that cost very explicit. So your data isn't being sold to pay for that. However, if the typical question we get after that is like, well, hold on, what about all these people who don't want to pay for push notifications? The important thing to point out here is we're actually just making this explicit, and it's a market. So if a push notification provider came along that offered this push notification service for free, they could do so, but you would be choosing to give away your data or look at some ads or perform some action for them, which you would consider to be free, but they can still pay for the service underneath.
So I'm assuming eventually you're going to have kind of like a marketplace for advertisers where they can have the option of paying for push notification.
In a sense, like within this push notification market, users might opt in for certain ads if they don't want to pay these fractions of a cent.
I think it's important to say, okay, well, we're going to have these push notification providers that will offer different services. So like maybe they go through Google, maybe they go through Baidu, maybe they go through DeepStream, all these other services. And they all have different costs associated with them. So you as a user can actually choose which provider you want to go for. So maybe maybe you don't like the idea of your information going through Google service, so you opt out of that and you choose a different provider. Maybe you do want to use advertisements. You can go for that one. Maybe this one is just cheaper, so you go and pay for that one instead. It's not like there's advertisers per se. It's providers of a particular service, which is push notifications. In this,
I guess these things are all based around just getting to this base sort of messaging experience within a sort of decentralized fashion. So once we have that really down, that's when we'll begin working on these other sort of essentially business models. So two that I'll point out here. One is a sticker market, which would be sending stickers to people within chats, which seems like highly, highly trivial.
It's not. You know how big the emoji market is?
Yeah,
it's a big market. It's a big market.
Yeah, and it also makes it a bit more fun to use, particularly for the younger sort of audience.
And what's really interesting when we start doing this in the blockchain space, you can actually create real meme markets. So you could actually you could imagine a scenario in the future where you have a stock portfolio which is all based on memes, and they get their value from attention that they're producing within the network. And then maybe you could even pay for your coffee in a cafe from your Pepe holdings.
In the past, say, year and a half-ish, what has been your biggest hurdle right now in developing Status?
I guess just getting Go Ethereum to behave on a resource-restricted device. It was originally not intended to do to work on these sort of devices. The Light Client protocol is, but at the same time, like getting it to all work and behave nicely, it's just part of the process of this whole ecosystem evolving. Like I said, everything that we depend on is also in flux as well. So sometimes it's like building a castle on sand, but it seems to be working. So it's very, very fortunate to be where we are at the moment.
And are you guys planning to do an ICO? Are you doing private investors, VCs? Like, what's the roadmap for that?
Yeah, so Carl and I, we've been working together for about 6 years. 3 of those years we were doing software distribution. And we've been self-funded from that enterprise for the year and a bit that we've been operating Status. We'll be running our contribution period June 17th, which will be the launch of our Status network, which will be this utility token.
So June 17th, you're doing an ICO.
I wouldn't really call it an ICO. I think it's more about sort of members within the community who want to help contribute to our development. They can do that.
Oh, so they can actually donate like hours or the resources or knowledge that they have?
Yeah, in addition to ETH as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long is that open for? Is it indefinitely, or are you just going to have a timeline?
So it basically runs for 14 days or until the cap is reached.
What's the cap?
We're doing it a little bit differently because basically in order for Status to be successful, right, we want to maximize the possible stakeholders. So the more people that hold a very small amount of Status tokens become evangelists for the network. And then on top of that, if we're to move towards the sort of decentralized governance, we want as many people as possible who are helping to make the decisions for us. So rather than having this one set cap, we have it's called a first ceiling, and then basically these hidden ceilings that exist after that form this kind of curve. And the idea is if you're a very large contributor or a whale and you want to try and throw money into the network, it becomes a lot more difficult to do that. Explain that very well?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately we're trying a model where we're just trying to get a larger distribution. I'm
curious, have you read Vitalik's paper that just came out 2 days ago on ICOs?
Yeah, his blog post, absolutely.
Yeah. It's very fascinating.
He on a point there about sort of having actual identity in order to do the token issuance. And so this is one part of what we're doing as well. Is
you asked previously, like people can contribute code or translations or that sort of thing. So we've had this Status Genesis token, which is to reward people who have been contributing to our code base in the past, but also growing the sort of community and doing these translations and all these sorts of things. And so what is likely to happen is that we'll have a sort of preference period where these SGT holders will have a sort of first sort of priority up to a certain limits to contribute.
So like if you're a very active member of our community over the past year, you have increased likelihood that you'll be able to get some Status network tokens.
And this kind of, it's like a very sort of light form of identity, but it's very tenuous to call it that. But that's something that I think is where this space will end up going as it matures in the future.
Okay, cool. So let's recap. You're having your participation round coming up in a week or two. That's going to last about 14 days. You've mapped out your roadmap. Moving forward beyond whatever, just call ICO, or we'll call it whatever you want, community support, beyond your community support ICO right now. What is your initial roadmap in the next 6 months? What do you want to accomplish right now in those 6 months?
Yeah, so I think it's mostly to do with stability and optimizing what we have at the moment. We'll be moving into sort of security audits towards the end of Q3 with a bit of luck. And as that's happening, we're also going to be building out a whole bunch of other teams to work on these other dApps that we've mentioned. So like things like the sticker market, the DApp directory, this sort of teller network, which we haven't really gone into, but it's the idea of exchanging fiat for crypto tokens, similar to local Bitcoins, I guess. And on top of that, we're very animate in decentralizing Status itself. That's the whole point of having this network and having this governance separated out. So we're also doing another project called CommitEth, which is this sort of bounty system for GitHub.com. So these issues that you can create, other open source developers can actually get paid for contributing code in the future as well.
Cool, awesome. I like the sounds of that.
The other part to that is just sort of building out the team.
Okay.
So now we're, I guess, including 2 people on a trial month, we're actually a team of 14. We'd like to bring on some additional, project manager, a technical HR, and a few other positions. So if any of your listeners happen to enjoy ClojureScript, they should definitely reach out.
Yeah, or go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll make sure I put a link in the show notes so people can reach you. Well, I think we'll wrap it up over there. I just want to thank you guys for coming on and educating us on your new startup. And if people want to find out more about Status, what is the best resource for them to check out?
Sure. So that would be Status.im. We also have a very large Slack community of nearly 8,000 people. That's slack.status.im. And then Twitter/ETH Status.
Fantastic. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. And thanks for coming on.
Cool.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers.